Why shouldn't the U.S. government say, you know what, we use Palantir services? We would like a piece of Palantir.
Oh, there's a monstrous discussion.
Welcome back. Today we're going to be unpacking a move that's rewriting U.S. industrial policy, and this is the federal government taking roughly a 10% stake in Intel. That's not a grant or a loan, it's actual equity. And the question is, if Washington is willing to own part of a strategic chip maker, who's next? Intel stock has done very well, obviously leading into this announcement. And could Palantir be in the mix? How does this ripple across Nvidia and the broader defense AI complex? So I'm going to be going over all of this, the facts, the policy logistics, and the investable takeaways is what I will call it. So let's get going.
A lot of questions in the business community this morning about what the administration's intention is as it relates to buying stakes in other businesses.
Well, I think the Intel deal was a great example. The Biden administration gave, G-A-V-E, gave Intel, an American company, $11 billion grant in exchange for nothing to help them build semiconductors in America, which would be a really good thing. But why would you have, talk about corporate welfare. So Donald Trump sits in the room with me and Lip-Bu, the CEO of Intel, and says, come on, we've got to make it fair for America. And we agree. We get 10% of the company, which brilliantly equals $11 billion.
What is the bar for the government to deserve a stake in a company for free?
So I think the key is, where is the United States of America adding fundamental value to your business? If we are adding fundamental value to your business, I think it's fair for Donald Trump to think about the American people.
Why shouldn't the U.S. government say, you know what, we use Palantir services, we would like a piece of Palantir. We use Boeing services, we would like a piece of Boeing. There are a lot of businesses that do business with the U.S. government that benefit by doing business with the U.S. government. I guess the question is, where's the line?
Oh, there's a monstrous discussion about defense. Lockheed Martin makes 97% of their revenue from the U.S. government. They are basically an arm of the U.S. government. They make exquisite munitions. Amazing things that can knock a missile out of the air when it's coming towards you. But what's the economics of that? I'm going to leave that to my Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense. These guys are on it and they're thinking about it. But I tell you what, there's a lot of talking that needs to be had about how do we finance our munitions acquisitions. I think a lot of that is talking. And now you have the right people in the jobs and Donald Trump at the head thinking about what is the right way to do it. I tell you, the way it has been done has been a giveaway.
Super interesting topic, and we're essentially in a tech cold war. Chips and AI aren't just nice to haves, they're the new oil and steel. If you accept that analogy, the US is pushing to onshore advanced semiconductors, secure supply chains, and keep frontier AI out of adversary hands. And that's why you see export controls on these high-end GPUs and some record domestic fab incentives, and now outright equity stakes to anchor critical capabilities here at home. So what has actually happened? Well, in late August, Intel and the US government announced and confirmed a deal converting a big chunk of CHIPS Act support into $8.9 billion, so about $9 billion of Intel common stock, giving the U.S. government about a 9.9% stake. They rounded up to 10% stake in the company. The structure is designed to stabilize Intel's foundry turnaround and keep cutting-edge manufacturing under U.S. control. Terms include a warrant tied to Intel maintaining majority control of its foundry unit, essentially. So that's a guardrail there, preventing a spin-off or sale, sort of how they're structuring things that would undermine supply chain resilience. So Intel has even spelled out that Washington's role is a passive shareholder. So as you would probably imagine, that means no board seat, but with protective provisions around the foundry strategy. So they're trying to be, sure that the investment has some policy claim. So and that part is clear, making Intel's massive U.S. fab build-out actually stick and letting the taxpayer participate in the upside if it works. So this is a bit of a controversial move, I guess you could say. There's a lot to say about it. If it's positive, it's negative. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. But will the government buy stakes in other defense and AI firms? It sounds like that is the case. Signals out of Washington suggest this is not going to be a one-off. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, as you saw in the clip, has said the Pentagon is considering equity stakes in select defense contractors, explicitly naming Lockheed, Boeing, and Palantir among companies in that conversation. And so the markets have noticed. If you look at the defense names on the headlines, moving a bit higher, and investors have begun gaming out Intel-style interventions across the national security stack. So again, controversial move. Supporters call it smart industrial policy, and critics are, of course, saying the government should play no role in buying percentages of these companies. But the bottom line is it's on the table. I want to thank Moomoo, the sponsor of today's video. Since we're talking about government money flowing into national security tech companies, you need a research terminal that can keep up. I use Moomoo, the multi-asset platform used by over 26 million investors. It's $0 commissions on U.S. stocks, ETFs, and options, and zero contract fees on equity options. Here's why it's great for tracking names like Palantir, Nvidia, and the broader defense AI basket. They have an institutional holding tracker, allows you to quickly see which funds are adding or trimming, super helpful around 13F season. And of course, Moomoo AI, which is a way for you to get instant earnings summaries and key metrics, so you can jump from headline to context in one tap, as well as just the broader integrated workflow, watch lists, news, fundamentals, and options chains all in the same app, so you don't bounce between tools. And the current promo is fantastic. US users can get up to $1,000 in Nvidia stock with qualifying deposits now through September 25th. Tiers starting at $100 for $20 of Nvidia, $2,000 for $50, $10,000 for $300, and $50,000 qualifies for $1,000. There's also a limited time 8.1% APY cash sweep. That's 4.1% base plus a 4.0% booster. Use my link in the description to check the Nvidia bonus and the 8.1% APY booster before September 25th. Now back to whether a Palantir stake could be next. Here's the deep dive on how it concerns Palantir. Palantir is already mission-critical software for the U.S. government, as we all know. With momentum accelerating this year, we've had the Army Enterprise Agreement, a 10-year, up to $10 billion umbrella that's consolidating 75 contracts, streamlining procurement, and setting volume-based discounts. It's not a guaranteed $10 billion by any means, but it formalizes Palantir as the default platform across the Army's data and AI stack. And we've had Project Maven, the Maven Smart System. DoD raised the ceiling by $795 million this spring, so that's huge as well. And Palantir's Q1 and Q2 releases and reports of 2025 have flagged strong U.S. growth. What is the likelihood of an equity stake? I would say a little bit lower than Intel, because Palantir doesn't need a capital backstop for fabs, right? It's not a capital intensive business. The more probable path is bigger, longer dated software commitments, exactly what we're seeing with the Army and Maven, rather than the government owning PLTR shares, right? But the fact is, Palantir was explicitly mentioned in discussions underlining how strategically central it has become. So the net for investors being continued procurement, scale up, the base case bull driver, and equity stake would be an upside surprise, and certainly not in the core thesis. And the way I think about it is, would I want to sell 10% to the U.S. government? Would I want the U.S. government to buy 10% of Palantir? Well, what's good about that? It's a strategic partnership. If the U.S. government buys 10% of Palantir, are they going to buy less Palantir software? Certainly not. So I think, does it increase the value of Palantir by a substantial amount if there's that locked-in agreement? I think so. And of course, it backstops Palantir, they don't need extra cash. Extra cash is not even helpful. They have too much cash, almost. So the question is not the cash, but if you're able to get that backstop, that agreement, long-term, the contracts are going to keep flowing in and potentially even increase, I think it's probably worth selling 10% of the company. Or it's not really a sale, it's more of just an additional sizable, large investor, and of course it would boost the stock. Take more shares off market if you want to think of it that way, and a really long-term partner in the U.S. government would certainly be a positive. I think there are some ways you would say it's not a good thing, but I do think it would be a positive. Do I think it's going to happen? The likelihood is probably not super high. But for Nvidia, let's talk about this one. This might be a name that's alongside Palantir. And we'll quickly hit on Anduril. So for Nvidia, the government's been fighting them on what's actually going to China for the next-gen AI chips and trying to skim to 15% of that revenue as a profit share for access concept. And Nvidia has said that 15% requirement isn't finalized, so it's a pretty fluid situation. I think the 15% stake in Nvidia is very unlikely, or any stake rather, not 15%, given how large that would be, pretty much unaffordable, right? It would be really difficult to pull off a size investment that size. As for Anduril, this could be another one that could certainly happen. The company is raised at a $31 billion valuation this summer, and so certainly more within the realm of possibility for an investment in terms of size of the investment. So I think Washington is really behind Anduril, very critical infrastructure, I guess you could say. And I would keep my eye on that. Of course, Anduril is a great partner of Palantir's. So what we're looking at here is it's an industrial strategy with direct equity where critical capacity needs a backstop, which of course Intel is at most risk here, needs the money, needs the cash. The naysayers will tell you this is not the place for activist industrial policy, but that's the point. Washington is prioritizing resilience and strategic control in AI and semis, even if it means rewriting some of these norms and doing things that are, have potentially never been done before. At the very least, even if Palantir is not invested in, it certainly boosts the AI sector for everyone else. Of course, Palantir benefits more indirectly there. So just to hit on the Palantir situation one more time, I think the bull case leans on contract scale up, not anything to do with equity, but we can certainly watch what's going to happen here. Bottom line for me is an equity stake is possible, but not required for the thesis. Of course, it's not required. And the Intel stake is a line in the sand and a signal that when capabilities are truly strategic, the U.S. will own the outcome. And for Palantir holders, I would say the backdrop is powerful. The procurement machine is shifting toward commercial AI native platforms, of course, as we know, and Palantir is already embedded. So if the equity stakes spread, it'll be in targeted cases, and the broader story is sustained policy-driven demand for defense, AI, and secure semis. So obviously we got to watch the data. We got to see what happens with contracts and where policy and product meet. But I'm bullish on Palantir. I think this is only good for the company, and interesting to see essentially the name drop and the interest from the U.S. government and how critical Palantir will continue to be, and increasingly so for the future. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I guess, this controversial policy stance and what you have to say about it. Until next time.